180 feet beneath the North Sea, a survey team's sonar has detected something that should not exist. A World War II submarine, intact and identifiable, lies in waters that have been mapped and documented for 8 decades. When they contacted naval archives across Europe asking for identification, every response was the same: not ours. Experts in maritime history say this is impossible. Every submarine lost in the Second World War has been accounted for. The records are exhaustive, meticulous, cross-referenced across multiple nations. There is no such thing as an unknown submarine from that conflict. Except now, there is. In the summer of 2023, a Norwegian hydrographic survey vessel was conducting routine seabed mapping operations in the North Sea. The ship, operated by a private company under contract to update navigational charts, had been working the same grid for weeks. The crew expected nothing unusual. This stretch of ocean had been surveyed countless times. Every rock formation, every wreck, every feature of the seafloor had long since been cataloged. At approximately 300 meters offshore from the Norwegian coast, the multi-beam sonar picked up a contact. The shape was unmistakable to anyone familiar with subsurface archaeology. Long, cylindrical, with a distinctive conning tower rising from the midsection. A submarine. The survey team marked the coordinates and moved on. Wrecks are common in these waters. The North Sea was a battlefield for 6 years during World War II. Hundreds of vessels went down. Finding one more submarine was hardly news. But when the team returned to port and began processing the data, something felt wrong. The chief surveyor pulled up historical wreck databases. He cross-referenced known submarine losses in that area. Nothing matched. The databases showed no recorded submarine within 5 nautical miles of this position. He contacted the Norwegian Coastal Administration. They checked their records. No match. He reached out to the UK Hydrographic Office. They searched their extensive databases of war losses. Nothing fit. He tried Germany's Deutsches Schifffahrtsmuseum, the authority on German naval losses. They found no record of a submarine sinking at those coordinates. A remotely operated vehicle was dispatched to capture footage. The remotely operated vehicle descended through the cold water and found the submarine resting on the seabed, listing slightly to port. 70 years of marine growth covered most surfaces, but the hull remained remarkably intact. The conning tower stood clear of the sediment. Deck gun mounts were visible. The propeller shaft extended from the stern. The remotely operated vehicle circled the wreck, capturing hours of video. When analysts reviewed the footage, they noted details that would prove critical. The submarine was approximately 70 meters in length. It had a single deck gun forward of the conning tower. The conning tower itself showed a distinctive profile. And most importantly, there were identifying marks none. No painted numbers on the hull. No national insignia. No builder's plates that the cameras could detect. Photographs were compiled and sent to naval historians across Europe. The responses came back within days. The submarine appeared to be German, likely a Type 7 variant, the most common U-boat class of the war. But when researchers checked the comprehensive loss records for Type 7s, none matched this location or description. The British Admiralty kept exhaustive records of every submarine they sank or tracked during the war. This submarine did not appear in their files. German naval archives documented every U-boat ever built, every mission, every loss. This submarine did not match any unaccounted-for vessel in their records. Soviet archives opened after the Cold War revealed no missing submarines in this area. American records, equally thorough, showed nothing. Within 3 months of the discovery, every major naval archive in Europe had been contacted. Every submarine database had been searched. Every possible lead had been pursued. And the answer was always the same. We have no record of this vessel. It is not one of ours. Maritime historians were baffled. This should not be possible. The Second World War is the most documented conflict in human history. Submarine losses, in particular, were meticulously tracked. Navies needed to know which boats were missing, where they had last reported, what their missions had been. Families needed notification, governments needed accountability. Yet here was a submarine that fit no records, claimed by no nation, acknowledged by no archive, an impossible wreck in a well-mapped sea. The impossible problem. To understand why this discovery is so disturbing, you need to understand just how thorough the record-keeping was during World War II. This was not some distant medieval conflict where ships vanished without trace. This was an industrialized war fought by bureaucratic nation-states that documented everything. The German Kriegsmarine maintained precise logs of every U-boat ever commissioned. More than 1,150 submarines were built. Each one received a hull number, a commissioning date, and a construction yard designation. Each one had a service record documenting every patrol, every commander, every crew change. When a U-boat was lost, the circumstances were investigated, recorded, and filed. After the war, Allied intelligence spent years compiling captured German records into comprehensive databases. The list of U-boat losses is not speculation. It is documented fact. The British Royal Navy kept equally detailed records. Every submarine contact was logged. Every attack was documented. Every confirmed kill was investigated. The Admiralty tracking rooms plotted the movements of German submarines across the Atlantic with precision that bordered on obsessive. When a U-boat went silent, British intelligence worked to determine whether it had been sunk, damaged, or simply evaded detection. Post-war analysis cross-referenced German records with British operational logs to create a complete picture of the submarine war. The result is a historical accounting that should leave no gaps. Researchers today can tell you the fate of virtually every submarine that served in World War II. They can tell you where it sank, when it sank, and in many cases, why it sank. They can identify the crew, the mission, the last known position. The documentation is exhaustive. Yet the submarine in the North Sea matches none of these records. And that creates a problem that naval historians say should be impossible to explain. Every Type 7 U-boat ever built is accounted for. Of the 709 Type 7 submarines commissioned by Germany, 694 were lost during the war. The remaining 15 were surrendered or scuttled. The fate of every single one is documented. If this submarine is a Type 7, which experts believe it is based on its dimensions and design, then it should have a hull number, a service record, and a documented loss report. It does not. Some researchers initially wondered if the submarine might have been misidentified during the war. Perhaps it was attacked and sunk, but the attacking vessel recorded the wrong location. This happens. Navigation in wartime was difficult, and positions could be off by miles. When analysts checked every U-boat loss within 200 nautical miles of the discovery site, none matched. The hull design was wrong. The dates were wrong. The circumstances of loss did not align. Every submarine sunk in that region has either been found and positively identified, or its loss has been confirmed through other means. There are no unaccounted for submarines that could plausibly be this wreck. The possibility of a Soviet submarine was quickly ruled out. Soviet submarine operations in the North Sea during World War II were limited. Every Soviet boat lost in that theater is accounted for, and none match the design visible on the sonar scans. The submarine is clearly German in construction. British submarines can also be ruled out. The Royal Navy lost 79 submarines during the war. Every single one has a known fate. None were operating in this area when they went down. The hull shape does not match British designs. American submarines operated primarily in the Pacific. The few that served in European waters are all accounted for. None were lost in the North Sea. That leaves German U-boats. And according to every archive, every database, every historical record, there are no missing German submarines in this location. The records say this submarine does not exist, yet it clearly does. The discovery has forced historians to confront an uncomfortable possibility. Either the records are wrong, which would undermine decades of research and documentation, or something about this submarine was deliberately hidden, which would suggest a cover-up spanning multiple governments and 8 decades. Neither explanation is satisfying. The longer researchers examine the evidence, the more disturbing the questions become. The evidence. The Norwegian survey team returned to the site in late 2023 with advanced scanning equipment. If naval archives could not identify this submarine, perhaps the wreck itself could provide answers. A high-resolution sonar system was deployed to create a 3-dimensional model of the submarine. The scans captured every surface detail, every protrusion, every damage mark. When the data was processed, researchers had a digital recreation accurate to within centimeters. They could measure the hull length precisely. They could examine the conning tower structure from any angle. They could analyze the damage pattern and attempt to determine how the submarine had been lost. The measurements confirmed what analysts had suspected from the initial sonar contact. The submarine was 71.5 meters in length, with a beam of 6.2 meters. These dimensions matched a Type 7C U-boat, the most common variant of the most common submarine class in the German Navy. Over 560 Type 7C boats were built between 1940 and 1945. They served in every theater where German submarines operated. They were workhorses of the Kriegsmarine, reliable, effective, and well-documented. But when researchers cross-referenced the dimensions with loss records for Type 7C submarines, they found something strange. Every Type 7C lost in the North Sea had already been identified and located. This submarine should not be here. The ROV footage provided additional clues. The submarine's hull showed no catastrophic damage. There were no gaping holes from torpedo strikes. No evidence of depth charge detonations. The pressure hull appeared intact. Whatever had sent this boat to the bottom, it had not involved a violent explosive event. The conning tower structure was particularly interesting. The configuration matched late-war Type 7C boats, which featured anti-aircraft gun platforms and additional armor. This meant the submarine had likely been built after 1943, when these modifications became standard. That narrowed the possible construction window to less than 2 years. And during those 2 years, every Type 7C commissioned by Germany was meticulously documented. The deck gun forward of the conning tower had been removed or had fallen away, leaving only the mounting hardware visible. This was not unusual. Many U-boats lost their deck guns to corrosion or impact with the seabed, but the mounting pattern provided additional confirmation of the submarine's identity. It matched German specifications from 1944. The propeller configuration visible at the stern showed a 4-bladed design consistent with Type 7C boats. The rudder was still attached and appeared to be in a neutral position. The diving planes, horizontal control surfaces near the stern, were also visible and seemed undamaged. What the remotely operated vehicle footage did not show was any identifying information. The hull numbers that should have been painted on the conning tower were either corroded away or had never been applied. No national insignia was visible. No builder plates could be located on the external surfaces accessible to the remotely operated vehicle. The absence of identifying marks raised immediate questions. German U-boat crews were required to display hull numbers. These numbers were painted prominently on the conning tower for identification purposes. The numbers allowed friendly aircraft to identify submarines on the surface. They helped port authorities track which boats were arriving and departing. This was standard procedure. For a submarine to lack these markings was highly unusual. It suggested either that the paint had completely corroded away, which seemed unlikely given the intact condition of other surfaces, or that the markings had been deliberately removed or never applied. Some researchers began to wonder if this submarine had been engaged in operations that required anonymity. Certain missions during the war involved submarines operating without identification to maintain deniability. But these missions were rare, carefully documented, and always involved boats whose ultimate fate was accounted for. The damage pattern on the hull provided another clue. The submarine showed no signs of combat damage, but there were indications of stress fractures along the pressure hull seams. These fractures suggested the boat had descended beyond its rated depth before sinking. Type 7 submarines were rated to 300 meters maximum depth. Beyond that, the pressure hull would begin to fail. If this submarine had exceeded its depth rating, it might explain the lack of explosive damage. The crew could have taken the boat down deliberately, attempting to evade depth charges or surface vessels. If they went too deep, the hull would have failed gradually, flooding the compartments and sending the boat to the bottom without catastrophic rupture. This scenario was plausible. It happened to other submarines during the war, but it still did not explain why this particular boat was not in the records. Every U-boat that sank due to depth exceedance was documented. The circumstances of loss might not always be clear, but the loss itself was recorded. The three-dimensional model created from the sonar scans was distributed to submarine experts around the world. Analysts at the German U-boat archive examined it in detail. They confirmed that the submarine was almost certainly a Type 7C based on every measurable feature, but they could not identify which specific boat it was. The model matched the design specifications perfectly, but without hull numbers or other identifying information, they could not link it to any individual vessel in their records. British naval historians reviewed the scans and reached similar conclusions. The submarine was German, late war construction, Type 7C variant, but its presence in this location at this time matched no known loss from their extensive databases. The evidence was clear. This was a real submarine, a German Type 7C lying on the seafloor in a location where no such submarine should exist. And the longer experts examined it, the more convinced they became that the answer would not come from the wreck itself. The answer lay somewhere in the historical records that everyone insisted were complete. If you are still here, you have seen how a submarine was found where no records say one should, and how every archive in Europe claims this is impossible. Comment 2 below if you are following this investigation. If you have not subscribed, please do so, and turn on the bell notification so you do not miss what comes next. Your support helps us uncover the stories that official histories tried to erase. Now let us examine the theories that could explain an impossible submarine. The discovery forced historians to confront possibilities that challenged everything they thought they knew about wartime documentation. The word discovery matters because it exposed gaps in what had been treated as complete. The first theory was simple bureaucratic failure. Perhaps the records had been destroyed. German archives were bombed during the war. Some documents were deliberately burned by retreating forces. But submarine construction involved multiple entities keeping independent records, shipyards, supply offices, training facilities, naval command. For a submarine to vanish from all documentation would require an impossibly unlikely pattern of destruction. The second theory was darker. Perhaps this submarine had been on a mission so sensitive its existence was deliberately concealed. Germany conducted black operations late in the war, strategic cargo runs, evacuation missions, technology transfers. Some were documented only at the highest command levels. Some may not have been documented at all. But hiding the construction of a 71-meter submarine in a shipyard would be extraordinarily difficult. The third theory involved falsified records. Perhaps the documentation existed, but was altered after the war to conceal war crimes, looted cargo, or politically sensitive circumstances. But maintaining such a conspiracy across multiple governments for 8 decades seemed implausible. The fourth theory was both mundane and embarrassing. Perhaps the submarine was documented correctly, but researchers had been searching the wrong files. Archives are complex. Documents get misfiled. Cross-referencing fails. The submarine might exist in the records but remain effectively invisible to conventional research methods. Each theory had merit. None fully explained an impossible wreck. What the forensic analysis shows. When the Norwegian team returned to the wreck site in early 2024, they brought equipment designed to answer questions that sonar alone could not address. If the archives would not identify this submarine, then forensic analysis of the wreck itself would have to provide the answers. A remotely operated vehicle equipped with a manipulator arm was deployed to collect physical samples. The vehicle approached the submarine's hull and scraped away decades of marine growth to expose bare metal. Using a cutting tool, it removed small steel samples from the pressure hull plating. These samples were brought to the surface, preserved in controlled conditions, and sent to metallurgical laboratories for analysis. The metallurgy would tell researchers when and where the submarine had been built. Steel composition varied by manufacturer, by era, by nation. German steel from 1944 had a different chemical signature than British steel from the same period. The alloys used, the impurities present, the grain structure of the metal, all of these factors could be analyzed to determine origin. The lab results came back within 6 weeks. The steel was definitely German. The composition matched samples from submarines built at Deutsche Werke in Kiel and Germania Werft in Kiel between 1943 and 1945. The manganese content, the carbon levels, the trace elements, everything aligned with late-war German submarine construction. This finding eliminated the theory that the submarine might have been built by another nation and disguised to resemble a U-boat. The steel was German. The construction was German. This was a Kriegsmarine submarine. But the metallurgical analysis also revealed something unexpected. The steel quality was higher than typical for late-war German submarines. By 1944, Germany was running low on high-grade materials. Submarines built in the final years of the war often used inferior steel with higher impurity levels and less consistent alloy composition. The samples from this submarine showed none of those compromises. The steel was high quality, consistent, well manufactured. It suggested the boat had been built earlier in the war than the conning tower configuration indicated, or that it had been constructed with strategic materials reserves not available to ordinary production. Further remotely operated vehicle dives focused on the interior of the submarine. The hatches were sealed, but the vehicle cameras were able to peer through damaged sections of the hull into some compartments. What they saw provided additional clues. The forward torpedo room was partially visible. 4 torpedo tubes were identifiable, matching the standard configuration for Type 7C submarines. No torpedoes were visible in the tubes, suggesting they had either been fired or removed. Racks for storing additional torpedoes lined the compartment walls, but corrosion made it impossible to determine if any had been loaded. The control room, located beneath the conning tower, was too badly corroded to reveal useful details. Instruments had long since dissolved. Brass fittings had turned green. Steel frameworks remained, but anything made of organic materials had been consumed by the sea. The engine room showed remnants of the diesel engines that had powered the submarine on the surface. Twin engines, each capable of generating approximately 1,000 horsepower, sat in their mountings. The configuration matched Type 7C specifications exactly. The drive shafts extended aft toward the propeller, their alignment still visible despite decades of marine growth. The battery compartment, located beneath the engine room, held the most interesting discovery. Lead-acid batteries used in World War II submarines consisted of massive cells filled with sulfuric acid and lead plates. When submarines sank, their batteries often remained intact for decades, slowly leaking their contents into the surrounding water. Environmental surveys near World War II wrecks frequently detect elevated lead levels from corroded batteries. But when the ROV examined this submarine's battery compartment, the lead levels in the surrounding sediment were surprisingly low. The batteries appeared to have been removed or were never installed. This was unusual. A submarine without batteries could not operate submerged. The electric motors that drove the propeller underwater drew power exclusively from the battery banks. A submarine with missing or removed batteries was essentially a surface vessel. The discovery raised immediate questions. Had the submarine been stripped of equipment before being scuttled? Had it been under construction but never completed? Or had the batteries been removed for another reason entirely? Researchers began examining the possibility that this submarine had been deliberately scuttled before completion. Germany scuttled dozens of partially completed submarines in the final weeks of the war to prevent them from falling into Allied hands. Shipyards were ordered to destroy boats still under construction rather than let advancing armies capture them. Many of these boats were towed to deep water and sent to the bottom. The idea that this hull had been deliberately scuttled made sense, on the face of it. But if this submarine had been scuttled incomplete, it should still appear in shipyard records. WWII and Germaniawerft both kept detailed logs of submarines under construction. The Allies captured those logs intact. Post-war researchers compiled comprehensive lists of every U-boat laid down, launched, commissioned, or scuttled. An incomplete submarine towed out and sunk should appear in the scuttling records. Yet when researchers checked those records, the submarine was not there. Every scuttled Type 7 from the shipyards that built these boats was accounted for. Their hull numbers were known. Their locations were documented. This submarine did not match any of them. Records did not explain the wreck. The conning tower structure provided another clue. The ROV was able to access the interior of the conning tower through a corroded hatch. Inside, the remains of the attack periscope housing were visible. The periscope itself had long since corroded away, but the mount remained. Nearby, the sky periscope housing showed similar deterioration. The conning tower interior offered evidence the team could examine closely. What caught researchers' attention was the configuration of the periscope mounts. Type 7 submarines used a standard periscope layout that varied only slightly between early and late production boats. The spacing between the attack periscope and the sky periscope was precise, dictated by the need to fit both mechanisms into a cramped control room. The spacing on this submarine matched late war configurations exactly. Periscope manufacturers left identifying marks on their products. Small stamps and serial numbers indicated which factory had built each periscope and when. Researchers hoped that if they could locate these marks, they might finally identify the submarine. The ROV cameras zoomed in on the corroded periscope mounts and found one small mark, barely visible through the corrosion, showing 3 letters, CZW. Carl Zeiss Werke, one of Germany's premier optical manufacturers. Zeiss supplied periscopes to most German submarines during the war. The company kept detailed records of every periscope manufactured, including serial numbers and delivery dates. If the serial number on this periscope could be recovered, it would identify exactly when the periscope was made and which submarine it was installed in. But the serial number, if it had ever been stamped next to the manufacturer's mark, was completely corroded. Only the 3 letters remained, confirming German manufacture, but providing no specific identification. The remotely operated vehicle survey continued for 3 weeks, documenting every accessible surface of the submarine. By the time the team completed their work, they had created the most detailed forensic record of the wreck possible without physically entering the sealed compartments. And while the evidence confirmed that this was definitely a German Type 7C submarine built between 1943 and 1945, it did not identify which submarine it was or explain why it appeared in no records. The final clue would come not from the wreck, but from a dusty archive in a building that researchers had already searched once before. Sometimes the answer is not hidden. It is simply misfiled. In February 2024, a German naval historian named Klaus Hoffmann was researching fuel deliveries to Norwegian U-boat bases when he found a logistics file referencing submarine U3-135. The designation fell within the standard Type 7C numbering sequence. But when Hoffmann checked the official records, U3-135 did not exist. He contacted the team investigating the unidentified wreck. Over 3 months, they uncovered a paper trail scattered across multiple archives. U3-135 had been commissioned in October 1944 for experimental snorkel testing. Because it never went on combat patrols, it was filed under testing command records instead of operational U-boat databases. When Allied forces captured German archives, they prioritized combat records. Experimental submarines ended up in separate collections that post-war researchers rarely searched. On April 28, 1945, 6 days before surrender, U3-135 received scuttling orders. The crew removed the batteries, painted over the hull numbers, towed the boat northwest of Norway, and sent her to the bottom. The coordinates matched the wreck location to within 2 nautical miles. The submarine had not vanished because records were destroyed. It vanished because records were misfiled. If one submarine could hide for 8 decades in plain sight, how many others might still be waiting? The submarine in the North Sea is no longer unknown. U-3135 has been identified, its history pieced together from fragments scattered across multiple archives. The mystery is solved, except for the questions it raises about what else we might have missed. The Second World War produced more documentation than any previous conflict. Millions of reports, logs, orders, and records were compiled by militaries obsessed with bureaucracy and control. We assume that this mountain of documentation is complete, that everything has been cataloged, cross-referenced, analyzed. The discovery of U-3135 proves that assumption is fragile. This submarine did not disappear because records were destroyed. It disappeared because records were filed incorrectly, organized by categories that made sense in 1945 but obscured the boat's existence from researchers 78 years later. The documents were there the entire time. They simply were not where anyone thought to look. How many other submarines, how many other ships, how many other military operations exist in similar bureaucratic limbo? How many files sit misfiled in archives, waiting for someone to stumble across them while researching something else entirely? The answer is uncomfortable. We do not know. We cannot know. The archives are too vast, the filing systems too complex, the possibilities too numerous. The sonar that found U-3135 was conducting a routine survey. The researchers who identified it were investigating fuel deliveries. Neither was looking for a missing submarine. The discovery was accidental, a combination of luck and persistence. How many other discoveries are waiting for similar accidents to occur? The ocean keeps its secrets for as long as we fail to ask the right questions. And sometimes, as U-3135 proves, the secrets are not in the ocean at all. They are in filing cabinets, misfiled under the wrong category, invisible until someone looks in a place no one thought to search. So what do you think? Are there other submarines, other ships, other pieces of history hiding in plain sight within the archives? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you want to see more investigations into the mysteries that bureaucracy buried, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive. The ocean is full of wrecks, but sometimes the most important discoveries are made on dry land, in dusty archives, among papers that everyone assumed had already been read. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep searching for the truth beneath the surface.